ANA eLearning Academy is brought to you by CDN Graysheet, a trusted source of rare coin and currency valuations since 1963.
Thanks for joining us on a Friday night or evening, wherever you are. My name is Andy Dickus, and welcome to the ANA's eLearning Academy. And today is another in our presentations covering money big and bold. It's National Coin Week, so happy National Coin Week, everyone. We are celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Morgan dollar, last Morgan dollar, the 100th anniversary of the first peace dollar, and the 50th anniversary of the Eisenhower dollar. And along with it, we're featuring money big and bold. And I think we can all agree that the story that Doug's about to tell is certainly falls in that category. So I would like to thank the Graysheet for sponsoring our eLearning Academy. I do need to make a plug, or I would like to make a plug. During National Coin Week, which ends tomorrow, you can register to be a member of our association if you're not already, with a gold membership to the ANA with online access to our magazine, plus a variety of other benefits that we offer for just $5. So please join us. We'd like to have you be a part of the ANA. So tonight, again, we are going to learn about one of the most famous and infamous times in the history of the world. And we're going to be learning about politics, ego, and tragedy. And our presenter tonight, you probably have seen him present in the past. Doug Mudd is the curator and museum director here at the American Numismatic Association. He teaches ancient classes in our summer seminar and at our conventions. And I think we are in for a treat tonight. So without further ado, I will pass it to my boss and friend, Doug Mudd.
Thank you, Andy, and welcome everybody. I hope this will work out. It's a little bit of an experiment. We're going to be talking about coins that illustrate an interesting and difficult time in history with very important coins and gigantic egos involved in a political struggle. So, as the title says, a bold tale of political intrigue for the subtitle. Before I start, please excuse any coughing I have. I have a persistent cough. I hopefully have it under control for this presentation, but we'll see. Also, note that the images are from C&G. They're very generous in allowing people to use images from their websites. So almost every single image in here is from the C&G records of their sales. Now, we can start, and we'll start with a basic introduction. Money has had many uses over the ages beyond its original development for purposes of long-distance trade and military power. Among them is the use of money as a means of communication through the designs and legends. A nation's money is often the first impression a visitor gets of the nature of a country. As such, these designs and legends have always been considered important by the authorities responsible for their issue. It is part of the interest of currency that it reflects so much of the age and civilization which made it. What follows is a cautionary tale of the dangers of political faction in the setting of the Roman Republic, as illustrated by a series of coins that were created before and during the civil wars between 48 and 31 BC. The fight between the Caesarians and the Republicans sent the Republic into its final death throes, only ending with the emergence of Octavian Caesar, now known as Augustus Caesar, as the sole ruler of the Roman world. The coins express the origins, loyalties, and political agendas of the primary leaders in these wars. So we'll go first with a little bit of history of what Roman Republican coins look like. So the Roman Republic gained its independence from the Etruscan kings in 509 BC. Among the leaders of this movement was Lucius Junius Brutus, first consul and forebear of Marcus Junius Brutus, who was a leader of the conspiracy against Gaius Julius Caesar, which occurred in 44 BC. So much later, this is a historical figure, but very famous to the Romans and a founder of many of the ideals for the Roman Republic. These ideals included that no individual should be more important than the state, and that the people, as represented by the Roman Senate, were sovereign, not any individual. Ideals which became a model for all future republics, including the United States. This coin is typical of the early series of Roman Republican denarii. A head of Roma with a mark for the denomination, the X, the name of the city, and images of the Dioscuri on the reverse, all images evoking Roman beliefs, patriotism, and tradition. So we'll go into some of the later designs. This coin exemplifies the changes that became common in the later republic. As time had gone on, various changes from the standardized coins, as the one we saw just before, started to creep in. Most, especially with regards to the moneyers, the three officials that were assigned each year to produce the coinage for the Republic, they did have some freedom that increased over time to influence the designs. So the standardized imagery of the Republic had been gradually replaced by references to the great heroes of the early Republic, but with a twist. The heroes referenced were the ancestors of the moneyers responsible for the designs, thus becoming a form of political self-promotion. Since being appointed one of these moneyers, or the triumviri monetalis, as they were known, was one of the beginning steps for a Roman political career. This early coin of Marcus Junius Brutus, who is one of our major characters in this story, who was born in 85 BC and was killed in 42 BC, struck during his term as moneyer in 54 BC, refers to his illustrious ancestry, which included L. Junius Brutus on the left, one of the legendary first consuls of the Roman Republic, and C. Servilius Ahala, who slew the tyrant Spurius Maelius and became a hero to the Roman Republic for that reason. Celebrating his connection to the tyrannicide, Ahala proved prophetic 10 years later when Brutus, because of his name and reputation for integrity, was recruited by the conspirators against Julius Caesar and became the figurehead for the assassins. The Brutus name was one of the oldest and most famous in the Roman Republic, and they were so staunchly associated with Republican ideals that it became very hard for any descendant to try to break away. They venerated their ancestors and would try to follow them as much as they could. So you get people like Cato following in the steps of his ancestor to the point of emulating his attitudes and mannerisms. Brutus was of the same ilk. Now, this should have been a warning to Caesar, but it did not apparently take hold. Brutus issued these coins to celebrate liberty. It has a personification of liberty on the obverse and a classic Roman Republican image of a senator escorted by his lictors, his combination bodyguard ceremonial escort. As Triumvir Monetalis in about 54 BC, he issued coins illustrating his strong Republican views and used libertas and portraits of his ancestor, L. Junius Brutus, to emphasize his political views and where he would stand if he was to become, move, excuse me, if he was to move higher up the political ladder. Now, in this date, early before the formation of the conspiracy against Caesar, when Caesar and Pompey, parts of the first triumvirate with Crassus. When Crassus was killed by the Parthians, the first triumvirate broke apart, and Brutus sided with Pompey the Great in a civil war that was fought between Pompey and Julius Caesar. After Pompey's defeat at Pharsalus, Brutus was granted a pardon by Caesar. Caesar favored him and appointed Brutus governor of Gaul in 46 BC and praetor in 44 BC, or governor of the province, and then a high official in the republic. Brutus repaid the favor through treachery to Caesar, but with loyalty to his ancestry and his inherited principles. In part, one of the reasons why Caesar favored Brutus was because support from Brutus and his ancestry was an important political tool, but also Caesar famously slept with his political enemies' wives, and Servilia, Brutus's mother, was one of the women that he had a relationship with, but he maintained that relationship for years because of her wisdom and her connections throughout Roman society. They genuinely apparently liked each other, but Brutus was not at all happy with this, and part of the reason why he betrayed Caesar is likely because of the relationship Caesar had with his mother. Of course, that doesn't appear on the coinage, but it affects some of the actions that occur, and we'll see some of those in the coinage. Now, here we have pushing the boundaries of what was proper in the Roman Republic. The elephant coinage of Caesar, as illustrated here, struck around the time he crossed the Rubicon into Italy in January 49 BC, thus starting the rounds of civil war, was used to pay Caesar's forces during the civil war against Pompey. Now, Pompey was part of the faction that supported the Roman Republican traditions, but the Senate, the core of the Republic, had forced Caesar into a position where if he gave up his power in Gaul and came home to earn his justified rewards of conquering the area, he gave up his civil protections, so he would be open to lawsuits and even the death penalty if the Republicans could get it passed. So Caesar was stuck between a rock and a hard place. If he came back to Rome as ordered by the Senate, he had to give up his armies and he had to give up his immunity as an official of the Roman Republic, which he could not do without essentially allowing himself to be ruined and possibly even executed. So during the civil wars that followed, the Roman world would be shaken and transformed. Since large quantities of denarii were necessary to pay Caesar's military expenses, the mint traveled with his armies. This issue was ordered not by a moneyer as was usual, but by Julius Caesar himself. And die evidence suggests that over 7 million of these coins were struck. The obverse depicts the triumph of good over evil. This was numismatic propaganda designed to encourage Caesar's soldiers during the long, intense campaign. The evil was represented by the snake, and in certain versions of this, you see the elephant actually stomping on the snake. The reverse depicts priestly emblems of Caesar's lifetime office as Pontifex Maximus of Rome. Now, this issue was, because of its large size, was almost certainly issued until the decisive battle of Pharsalus in August of 48 BC. Now, the problem is, while this is not strictly speaking against traditions completely, it was very unusual that a leader of an army and a political leader would put his own name on the coins Normally, you referred to dead ancestors, people that were no longer politically active. So this was the first step in what was to become a gradual slide into complete break with the old traditions of the Roman Republic. Here we'll discuss some of the coinages that were appearing before and during Caesar's time. In this case, this is a more normal sort of presentation, except with an unusual twist involving the portrait. The portrait on the obverse of this coin has sometimes been identified as the famous chief of the Arverni, Vercingetorix, whom Julius Caesar captured in 52 BC after the siege of Alesia. Victorious Roman generals were allowed to celebrate their victories in massive triumphal parades in which they displayed their captive opponents, sometimes years after their victory, during which time the captured leaders were kept in relatively luxurious captivity. You didn't want to have a massive display showing how victorious you were over a starved and beaten enemy. You wanted to have an enemy that looked like they were in their full strength and powerful. They would be dressed up in their war gear and followed by prisoners, all looking very fierce and powerful in order to enhance the reputation of the general holding the triumph. It is clear that Roman generals wanted the greatest spectacle possible at their triumphs, and part of this was to ensure the defeated enemies looked formidable. Now, they were forced to walk in chains in their national costume before being executed as part of the parade. In this case, Caesar appears to have broken numismatic tradition again by featuring the portrait of his fiercest Gallic enemy, which makes sense politically since Vercingetorix had been made famous by Caesar's own published work on the conquest of Gaul. Some of the experts believe that this identification is unlikely, but the large, distinctive, and carefully engraved head suggests the die cutter worked with an eye toward creating an individualized portrait rather than a stylized personification of a general Gallic figure. The reverse is also interesting because it depicts a distinctively Gallic chariot, apparently with a nude crew, which was something that had been written about and known, but is very, very rarely shown. This is one of the very few ancient images that we have of this. Well, to go on with our story of intrigue and politics, the next coin is a gold aureus, and it's issued by the Caesarians, and it references Caesar. Aulus Hirtius, praetor of the time this coin was struck, was a close friend of both Cicero and Caesar and had served as the latter's legate in Gaul. So he's one of his junior officers. He was consul in 43 BC, having been nominated by Caesar, and was sent along with Octavian and Pansa against Antony, who was besieging Decimus Brutus, not the Brutus that we're concerned with, at Mutina in basically southwestern Gaul. Hirtius defeated Antony, but fell while leading the assault on his camp. Hirtius is credited with completing Caesar's commentaries on the Gallic, Alexandrian, African, and Spanish wars. So this is an example of one of Caesar's chief lieutenants, and at this time he was a moneyer and issued a coin with Caesar's name on it. Again, a break with tradition because Caesar was a living figure and you were not supposed to celebrate the actions of living figures. So in this case, a close supporter of Caesar who owed his position to Caesar was able to repay his debt by issuing coins in Caesar's name. Now, with the next coin, we'll be looking at the Republicans for a second. Now, this is Cum Caeculus Metellus Pius Scipio, one of the great old names of the Roman Republic, descended of Scipio Africanus, who was the conqueror of Hannibal a couple of centuries before, well, a century and a half before. So Scipio was Pompey's colleague in the consulship of 52 BC and governor of Syria in 49 BC. He commanded the center line of Pompey's army at Pharsalus, after which he fled to Africa and formed an alliance with the king of Numidia, Juba. Through the influence of Cato, another enemy of Caesar's, he obtained control of the Pompeian forces after the defeat at Pharsalus and was able to try to attack Caesar. He was defeated by Caesar in 46 BC at Thapsus, where, not wanting to be captured, he committed suicide. This coin was struck during Scipio's African campaign to pay the soldiers under his command. Another example of an opponent of Caesar breaking tradition by using his own name on his coinage. So as Caesar began to push the boundaries of what could be shown on coins, his Republican enemies began to follow suit, which is a very interesting thought, because one of the cornerstones of their opposition to Caesar was the fact that Caesar was breaking Roman traditions. And on the other hand, they felt no scruples that once those traditions had been broken, why not follow suit and break them themselves, as exhibited by the coins. So here we have another coin issued by Caesar with his own name on it. No moneyer is shown. Now, what he's doing here is celebrating his ancestry. He hasn't shown his own portrait or anything like that, but he's celebrating his own ancestry and his accomplishments. The Julian clan, excuse me a second. Otherwise, the Julian clan, the gens Julia in Latin, traced its lineage back to Venus, the goddess Venus. The goddess's tryst with Anchises resulted in the birth of the hero Aeneas, who was who was an ancestor of the Romans. Aeneas in turn had a son, Ascanius, also known as Julius, who was the eponymous ancestor of the Julian clan. Caesar's association with Venus and with figures closely associated with the founding of Rome served as a principal theme in his political marketing. One of the criticisms made of Julius Caesar was his use of coins to promote his own accomplishments. It was okay to celebrate your ancestors and their accomplishments, but not living persons, and certainly not yourself. This was used by his enemies quite a bit. Now, with this coin, this becomes the turning point of the later civil wars, because Julius Caesar finally broke with Republican coinage traditions and placed his own image on his coins. Now, in this case, what this means to a Roman of the Republican era, it's a huge thing, because the Romans had specifically banished the kings from Rome in order to create the Roman Republic. And so the idea of having a person's portrait on the coinage suggested to them that they must be a king, because at the time of the early Roman Republic, at the time of the Roman Republic, basically most coins were issued by kingdoms, and they featured the head of the ruler, whether it be a queen or a king, and the king was in fact the owner of the coinage, and also technically the owner of their country, so everybody within the country was not free in the sense that Roman Republicans thought themselves to be free. So the idea of putting a head on a coin meant that Caesar was suggesting that he was a king, even though he did not say it at first. So what you see here is Caesar dict court. So here he's not claiming to be dictator for life, but he is showing the fact that at this point the Senate has given him the dictatorial powers for a 4-year period, basically. Now, there were even rumors that he wanted to be crowned king at this point because he was planning to invade the empire of Parthia. And as Romans did at the time, they were very addicted to checking with augurs and soothsayers to try to predict the future. It had been predicted to Caesar that in order for the Parthian Empire to be conquered, it must be conquered by a king. So the rumors said that he wanted to be crowned king in order to be able to conquer the Parthians. Whether or not this is absolutely true, we can't tell for sure, but it is a story that is passed down for 2,000 years plus. And so at some point, the rumors did exist, and whether or not Caesar actually believed in them, we'll never know. This type is the first portrait of Julius Caesar, struck in the first half of January 44 BC. And this was the title that was given to him before he became Dictator Perpetuus, which is dictator forever for his lifetime. The reverse features Juno Sospita and the moneyer M. Metius. So we'll move to the next slide. And here we have an example of the last issue, lifetime issue of Caesar's portrait coinage. And here you have an image of victory and Caesar with an unusual crown, a laurel crown which sticks out and is larger than normal. It's suggested that this might be some sort of variation on the regular laurel crown, perhaps one of the civic awards that the Romans had, but we're not sure. Now we'll move on. So the Roman Republic, Republican Roman values discarded. In the 3rd century, as you can read, Dio Cassius wrote, well, Brutus joined the conspiracy against Caesar, becoming the leader alongside Cassius. The reaction of the populace in the aftermath of the Ides of March, when Caesar was murdered, compelled Brutus and his 26 or so companions to leave Rome in April 44 BC. Instead of staying in the Senate and attempting to convince the crowds that it was a necessary thing that they did, or die for their ideals by being surrounded and killed by them. Interestingly, they were brave enough to overwhelm one man with more than 20 daggers, but they weren't brave enough to stand up for their ideals against the Roman people whom they were supposedly fighting for. Interesting political background there. The Senate's resolution to declare Brutus a public enemy on the 28th of November 44 BC was soon repealed, and in February 43 BC, he was appointed governor of Crete, the Balkan provinces, and later Asia. So you can see the Senate at this point was vacillating depending on who was closest to them with the largest army, more or less. And as different leaders from the different factions passed by, their resolutions could change very quickly. Suspecting Antony and Octavian, Brutus went to Macedonia, suspecting Antony and Octavian of raising armies and beginning to fight against the Republicans. Brutus went to Macedonia and won the loyalty of its governor, Hortensius, who allowed him to create an army and seize the funds that were prepared by Caesar for his Parthian expedition. Many of the troops that he was able to raise had actually been sent east to prepare for the expedition, and some of these troops joined Brutus. Now, as Brutus was in this area, he fought against some of the local tribes that had been in revolt, and he was successful against the Bessi, a tribe of Thracians, and he was hailed imperator by his troops, which was a very important title for him to have. Imperator became the basis for the later word emperor, but at this time it was the title given to victorious generals by their troops, and was a very prestigious title to have, especially important for people interested in political office. But after the establishment of the triumvirate by Caesar, Mark Antony, and forgot his name. I'll have to get to it. I mentioned it later. His name begins with an L. Brutus was outlawed again by the Senate and joined forces with Cassius at the city of Sardis in Asia Minor. In the summer of 42 BC, they marched through Macedonia and met Octavian on the major highway, the Via Egnatia, across the Balkans, just outside the city of Philippi, and won the first battle. However, the Octavian was not completely defeated, and there was a second battle shortly afterwards, a few months later, and Brutus committed suicide during the second battle on 23rd October 42 BC, using the dagger with which he assassinated Caesar. And here you'll see the coin that was produced at the time, one of the most famous of Roman coins, and one of the most politically charged coins in history. This is the famous Eidmar, and as you can see in the slide, I've outlined the various parts and meaning of them. So here's the famous Eidmar denarius. It was issued by Brutus as he gathered his forces to fight against Mark Antony and Octavian. Interestingly, despite his stated veneration for the ideals of the Roman Republic, Brutus used his own portrait and celebrated his and Cassius's murder of Caesar. The Republic was truly dead when its own supporters no longer believed in its ideals. Coins such as these illustrate the ability of money to communicate historical and political messages to those who can read them. So as you can see, the daggers actually represent Brutus and Cassius, who were friends before the conspiracy and leaders of the murder plot to kill Caesar. Now the pileus is a liberty cap, which was worn by freed slaves as a symbol of their liberty, and it's shown between the two daggers to show that Brutus and Cassius had freed the people of Rome and kept the Republic, kept them safe from kings and other types of tyranny. Eidmar refers to the date when Caesar was murdered, so it's Idibus Martius, Ides of March, March 15th, the date that Julius Caesar was murdered in 44 BC. Brutus puts his title of imperator, which he was very proud of, obviously. And Lucius Praetorius Sestianus was the name of the moneyer responsible for striking these coins. So here you have, as I said before, one of the most famous coins issued by the Romans, but also one of the most famous of politically charged coins. Now we'll move on to the second half and final part of this. Now, the Roman Republic fighting for the legacy. Mark Antony issued this coin in 43 BC. So this is before the death of Brutus, but it leads up to some of the elements that created the second triumvirate. Following the assassination of Julius Caesar, it was unclear who would inherit his legacy. So among the Caesarians, there was a problem. With Caesar's death, there was a scramble to claim the legacy of Caesar. Now, Antony assumed control of the Caesarian armies, despite having heard of Octavian being named Caesar's heir. But he was in place, and within days of the funeral, Antony proclaimed himself as Caesar's dictatorial successor, first by surrounding himself with a bodyguard made up of Caesar's veterans, and then by compelling the Senate to transfer the provinces of Gallia Transalpina and Gallia Cisalpina to his control. This would give him a base of operations which would provide money and also recruits to increase his forces. Octavian, who was Caesar's official heir, was not pleased. As Antony began to flex his quasi-dictatorial muscle, Cicero, who had been sympathetic to Caesar's murderers, changed his opinion and convinced the Senate not to declare Caesar a tyrant in order to gain amnesty for his followers. So he switched his stance and began by, once again, when Antony set up his army, he denounced Antony through a series of speeches known as the Philippics. So Cicero was a figure who was at the center of the Republic, who was trying to take a moderate road between the two factions. Unfortunately, this meant that he was vacillating. He was seen as being vacillating because he kept switching sides based on what he thought was right, not what he thought was expedient or safe. So he was a very brave man, but at the same time, he was pretty much by himself, guaranteeing that eventually he would be murdered, as he was by Antony in another year or so. But at this point, he was courted by Octavian, who needed supporters and personally liked Cicero. So that Antony, when he arrived at Rome to claim his inheritance, hoped to acquire Cicero as an ally, which he did for a while against Antony. Octavian also began raising an army using veterans of Caesar's army, yet he was also able to acquire 2 of Antony's legions, showing that Antony's power base was not as strong as he could hope. Now, Antony was a very young man at this point. He started out at 17, and by this time, he's developing his political skills that would eventually allow him to be the ultimate victor in the civil wars. But in January 43 BC, the Senate granted Octavian the office of propraetor, along with the power of imperium, military command. This allowed him to command armies and raise armies, sending him along with the consuls for that year, Aulus Hirtus and Gaius Vibius Pansa, to fight for the Senate against Antony, which they did, and they defeated Antony at Mutina, leaving both of the consuls dead as a result, unfortunately for Octavian. Now, Octavian was in sole command of the army, and young and experienced as he was in this campaign, at the battle, he demonstrated himself to be Antony's military equal. Now, Antony, whom the Senate declared an enemy of the state, withdrew to Gallia Transalpina, his other province, and moved on to join with Marcus Lepidus, that is the third member of the triumvirate, which would be made in another year. Octavian was now slighted by the Senate. They made a terrible decision by not only angering Antony, but also the other most powerful person in the Roman Republic, Octavian, by refusing to recognize Octavian's success against Antony. Instead, they rewarded Decimus Brutus for Antony's defeat by transferring command of Octavian's legions to Brutus. As a result, Octavian refused any further assistance in the pursuit of Antony and decided to realign himself with Mark Antony. This was the beginning of the end for the Republic, as the two most powerful men in the Republic with the largest armies banded together and joined with Lepidus, who was a not a very active political leader, but a very influential leader, because he was the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome, after an appointment he got after Caesar's death. So with the three of them, they created a triumvirate that was unbeatable by the Roman Senate at this point. So Octavian demanded that the Senate appoint him to the vacated consulships and that Antony be pardoned. When the Senate refused, Octavian marched on Rome with his army. Facing no opposition, Octavian was elected consul in 43 BC, along with his cousin Quintus Pedius, who oversaw the creation of the Lex Pedia in September, making Caesar's murder, or the calling for it, capital crimes punishable by death. This left the field open for every one of the conspirators, the murderers of Caesar, to be hunted down and killed without trial. So at this point, both Antony and Octavian began issuing coins to celebrate their links to Julius Caesar and basically promote their positions within the Republic with an eye towards opposition that they've had with each other. They were not friends, but they knew that it was politically expedient to join together at this time in order to crush the remaining Republican enemies of Caesar. Here we have another example of the Republicans' coinage. This is issued by Brutus, and after his assassination of Julius Caesar, Brutus and Cassius occupied Rome, but had to flee when the funeral oration delivered by Caesar's protege, Mark Antony, turned public opinion against them. Brutus and Cassius went their separate ways, but met again in early 42 BC in Smyrna, Ionia, and, as we've already talked about, began their preparations to fight Mark Antony and Octavian, which did not work well for them. Another Republican coinage, this one issued to support Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus. He had accompanied his father at Corfinium and Pharsalus on the side of Pompey in the earlier civil wars. After his pardon by Julius Caesar, he retired to Rome in 46 BC. But after Caesar's assassination, he rejoined the Republican cause and supported Brutus and Cassius, and in 43 BC was condemned under the terms of the Lex Pedia for complicity in the assassination. Ahenobarbus achieved considerable naval successes against the Second Triumvirate in the Ionian Theater near Greece, during which time this denarius was minted. As you can see, it features the bow of a warship, and it has a trophy above the bow, showing that it's celebrating a victory that he had won. But Ahenobarbus eventually reconciled with Mark Antony and thereupon made him governor of Bithynia. He participated in Antony's campaign against the Parthians and was consul in 32 BC. When war broke out between Antony and Octavian, Ahenobarbus initially supported Antony, but disgusted by Antony's relationship with Cleopatra, sided with Octavian shortly before the Battle of Actium. His only child, Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, was married to Antonia Major, the daughter of Mark Antony and Octavia, Octavia was Octavian's sister. Their son, Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus, married Agrippina Minor, the sister of the Emperor Caligula, and was the father of the Emperor Nero. So supporting the right side would eventually gain rewards, even if you had started on the wrong side. Now we have a coin issued during the period of the triumvirs. This one features Octavian and the deceased Julius Caesar. Basically, Octavian is using this to draw the connection between himself and the beloved Julius Caesar in order to gain further political support. In the summer of 43 BC, following the Battle of Mutina, Octavian demanded from the Senate one of the consulships, which he got. Octavian, after he marched to Rome with his army, this was used in order to help with the payment for his armies. Now, this issue marks the first appearance of the pairing of portraits of Octavian and Caesar on obverse and reverse, and was meant to underscore Octavian's role as the rightful heir of the slain dictator. Antony would issue denarii pairing his and Caesar's portraits in April of that same year, so a little bit later. So as things are going on, the two most powerful men are positioning themselves and trying to gain support by emphasizing their close relationship with Julius Caesar, whom the people of Rome loved. Now, we'll end with the Republican cause with this coin of Brutus. Now, true to his Republican ideals, Brutus eschewed the use of his own portrait when he began coining jointly with Cassius early in 42 BC. But late in the summer, in the final months before the Battle of Philippi, he adopted the method of his adversaries and placed his own portrait on these coins. Now, no doubt the purpose of this was to encourage his troops to support him and encourage their memory of the history of Rome, and that Brutus was the descendant of the founder of the Roman Republic in opposition to tyranny. Now, this was not terribly successful, as the Caesarians were able to, the triumvirs were able to convince many of Brutus's troops to desert after the first battle of Philippi. And as we know, Brutus ended up committing suicide, and his attempts at swaying his followers and his troops were unsuccessful despite the use of the portrait. And here we have an example of Mark Antony trying to put himself on the coinage and make himself the most important person in the Roman Empire at this point. It's pretty much an empire. The Republicans are long gone at this point, and now you have Octavian ruling the western part of the Roman world, and Mark Antony ruling the eastern part. And this is where Mark Antony gets involved with Cleopatra and an unsuccessful invasion of Parthia, trying to follow the plans of his patron, Julius Caesar. The failure of that invasion and the disfavor that he earned by marrying Cleopatra was enough to lose support at Rome for Mark Antony, and eventually put Octavian in the position of being able to defeat Antony at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. But here's an example of Antony placing his own image on coins. And the end of our talk comes with the ultimate victory of Octavian, who became known as Augustus. So the empire is born wearing a republican skin, even though the republic is now dead. Octavian, who is now the first man in Rome, nothing happens without his permission and backing, but he ensures proper veneration to the republic and public support from the Roman people by using his connection to Caesar to legitimize his rule and using the forms of the Roman Republic. So he never actually called himself the Roman Emperor, but he was in fact in sole control of the Roman Empire at this point. But he was smart enough to not rile up too many people in opposition so that he did not get murdered, as in the case of Caesar or other people who had tried to rule Rome as solitary rulers. With that, we have an end to our story, and hopefully you've seen some very interesting coins which partly tell the tale of what can happen when you have political rivalries get to the point where the institutions of republics become destroyed and end up forming a despotism. And there we have it. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And do I turn it over to you now, Andy?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. I certainly learned a lot. Very interesting time in history and a very influential time in history. Gosh, you were thorough tonight, Doug. We don't have any questions. Anybody have a question for Doug on any of these coins or what was going on? Kind of the transformation from the Republic to the Empire? You were thorough, Doug.
I guess so. But I find this kind of approach to coins is very interesting to me, because I'm interested in the messages that you can get off of the coins. And this series allows you, through knowledge of when the coins were issued and the information that the coins themselves hold about who the issuers were and some of the symbolism on them, you can really supplement the historical background by using something that most historians don't use very often.
Doug, someone just asked, is the Eidmar the rarest of the coins that you highlighted today?
No, it's not. A couple of the gold coins are extremely rare. Some of them are fairly common, but it is not the rarest of them. It is by far the most famous, and I think by far the most valuable as well.
Hi, David. So we have another question. What was the source of the precious metals used in the coinage, particularly from the traveling mints?
Well, at this point, there was silver in certain areas throughout the Roman Empire. The biggest source of silver during this period was Spain, actually. So it's interesting if you're asking where the armies themselves are actually getting the silver. That's an interesting question, because it's not clear just how they would have done it, because they were wandering around quite a bit. Obviously, they were not in Rome, so they could not get access to the Roman treasury directly, but there were shipments made regularly for pay purposes to the armies. But in a civil war, that becomes unclear. So I think there's some more history that has to be researched to figure out where the silver from the Spanish mines went. There were also silver mines in the Balkans. And I believe the mines in Athens, in Attica, were still operational. So those probably were used to help pay for the forces of Brutus and Cassius. But the actual details of how the silver was distributed to these mints, I am not sure of, and I haven't seen anything that discusses that in detail.
What's a good reference, Doug, to attribute Roman coins?
Well, David Sears' books on the silver coinage of Rome is a very good reference, but the standard reference for the coins of the Roman Republic is Crawford's coinage of the Roman Republic. That is considered to be the standard, and that covers most of these coins but not the last coin. You also have some specialized works that have come out recently on the Roman imperatorial period, which covers this period from the last 60 years, well, the period between about the middle 50 years of the 1st century BC. Yeah. Well, these coins, they put the imprint on the and symbols on the coins by hand carving them into the dies. These are all struck coins, so they had to carve the dies directly and then use those to strike the coins. They didn't use hubs at this point, and so there's some debate with the idea that they may have developed letter punches later, but at this point they're pretty much carving it by hand as far as I'm aware.
And you get the one about gladiators? I think I've seen some coins with gladiators on them.
Yes, there are coins during the imperial period. Once the gladiatorial arena becomes part of the political landscape of Rome, where emperors would gain support by staging massive games, gladiatorial games and festivals, races, chariot races and things like that. And so you do see images of the games themselves. You see images of the Colosseum, and you see images, usually very small, of gladiators.
Well, everyone, thanks again for showing up for this very interesting presentation. Thank you, Doug. Very interesting part of history. So again, I will say happy National Coin Week to everyone. We're going to be wrapping up tomorrow. If you're interested, join me. I'm going to have a much less serious and kind of more lighthearted look at National Coin Week and the ANA and some of our online features. So join us if you can. Once again, I'd like to thank the Gray Sheet for their sponsorship of our e-learning program. And once again, I am going to plug our membership offers during National Coin Week. We have a gold membership offer with online access to our magazine for just $5. So you get digital access to our magazine and then all the other benefits of ANA membership. We'd love to have you join. Thanks again for joining us, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. If not, happy National Coin Week, and we'll see you again.